Okay, so today we're going to have a look at doing a blueprint style illustration. So let's get started. It's a new file. I'm going to make it 1000 by 1000, so I've got plenty of room. And the first stage we want to do is set up the background. So we're going to have a blueprint style background with a nice grid pattern over the top of that. So first we'll draw out a blue rectangle, or square in this case. And we're going to choose a particular shade of blue that I like, 54, 13 and 184. And we'll call that layer background. We'll add a new sub-layer to the background, which we're going to draw the grid on top of. We'll call that grid. We'll lock the back so that it doesn't move. So first thing to do is set up the grid. And this is a little tip that I picked up from Chris Spooner on his blog. You draw a vertical line, colour that white, take a copy of it and paste it in front with Apple F. Select again, and now we can rotate it to create a perfect cross. Okay, so this has done that. So now we want to select both of these and drag them into the swatches palette. We can use this in a second to help us create the grid, as you'll see. We'll delete what we had before. And now in the grid layer we will set the fill on that to be, need to draw this rectangle first on that grid layer, and we'll set the fill on that to be white. There we go. And now we'll set the pattern. Now you can see we now have a grid. It's a little bit too vibrant, so what I want to do is I want to take that down a little bit and reduce it to about 30% opacity. And that's us created our blueprint background. So now we're going to start looking at drawing something on top of it. We're going to draw a rocket today. We highlight the top and scale the nose so that we get a nice sharp point from the ellipse. Not too sharp because we want it to have a little bit of rounded at the end. We'll move down one of the sides, kind of give us a nose cone type of shape. Delete the other side because we'll reflect that across, so we have a perfectly symmetrical shape. We'll remove this bit out a little bit and adjust the direction we have it in. In fact, I'm going to delete the handle and the anchor so that we get a sharper edge when we join these in a second, as you'll see. Zoom out a little bit. Delete this point. Oh, that's the centre of the shape, not a spurious anchor. Highlight the entire shape, copy that in front again. Now we're going to reflect it to get the right hand side of the rocket. There we go. I'll pull that across. And now we're going to join the 2 points at the nose cone. I'll just zoom in a little bit to make sure we've got them exactly lined up. Now we'll join that. There we go. This has now joined those 2 points. Just making sure, yep. Zoom out to the base of the rocket. And we'll join these 2 points, then that'll create the flat base of the rocket. So here we can see we've got a very basic body shape. Make this a little bit wider by scaling it and symmetrical, and I'll bring the sides in a little bit to shave a little bit off the hips. That's probably a little bit too much. Let's go for 90. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. So now we want to create the thrusters, and they're going to be a similar shape to the rocket itself. So we'll copy the rocket, just a few adjustments, and we'll paste that on. First of all, we'll create a new layer for that. Let's just name this body. We'll get rid of that other layer that I've created earlier on. It's not got the right parts. We'll call them thrusters so that we copy the thrusters onto the right bit. Make sure the body's behind the thrusters. So, our first thruster, I'll create. Maybe make that a little bit thinner. It's a little bit more like it. Let's move that into position. We'll create a second thruster. Move that into position. Let's move that out a little bit. We'll actually just align them using the align tools. Align them horizontally. And now we'll create the part that attaches the thruster onto the main body of the rocket. I guess it's not called a body, but we'll call it that for this. Draw a rectangle, and we'll shear that by highlighting to the anchors on one side and just moving them down. And we'll put this into position where it's roughly going to go. We'll fill that blue. In fact, we'll fill all the shapes blue. You may want to work a little bit more on them to stop particular parts being see-through. For example, the body, you shouldn't be able to see the stroke line on the body when you put in the thruster arm. But I'm just going to fill it today so that it makes it a little bit easier just by layering things up correctly. We get everything looking as it should. So after a little bit of adjustment, we should be good to go. Just make sure to get this in the right position. A lot of this stuff is just kind of trial and error and see what looks the best. That's looking better. It's a little bit better. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the other engine and just have the two that I've got just now, copy them and reflect them across so that again we keep the symmetry in the rocket ship. Position that roughly in the right position. And I'm going to make sure everything's lined up horizontally using the align tool. Line up the individual bits so that they stay roughly where they are. And move this left rocket actually out a little bit, I think. Yeah, let's do that. That's just got the two two thrusters, so probably want to add an engine, so we'll add a new sublayer again. We'll add two sublayers, and first of all, and we'll organise the left and right thrusters before we add the main engine. So that'll be the left thruster with its attachment and the thruster itself, and the right one with the same. And it will create the main thruster, which will be the central engine that helps propel the rocket. It's quite straightforward, they'll just do a rectangle. Same fill and stroke as before. We'll scale the top of that to flare it out a little bit. We'll use the same shape, copy and paste that, and reflect it around the horizontal. That will allow me to match up the bottom of the main part of this engine and the flash that comes on the end of it, which is almost like the fire shield, if you want to call it that. So we'll scale that down and reduce the size of it. This has got the main engine, so now we can just double check everything's in the right place, and move that into position, and change the size of that to fit onto the base of the rocket. Looks about right now. Back a couple of pixels. What's this? Now we want to add a viewport so that people can see out of the rocket ship. There's no point in going all that way to space without being able to see where you are. So create that by creating two ellipses, or circles actually. Let's get the terminology correct here. Two circles. Highlight both, align them horizontally and vertically, and use the minus Pathfinder tool, which will create a sort of donut shape. We'll fill this white, and we'll see in a little minute why we're going to fill this white, and we'll place that in the ship, make it a little bit smaller, and centralise it on the ship. So we're now going to look at adding a couple of little bit of flashes to the thrusters and main body, which will create a little bit of detailing and help us make it feel a little bit more like a rocket ship. So we copy the thruster and paste a new thruster on top of it with Apple F, and then create another object, in this case a square, on top of that. Using the minus Pathfinder tool again, we're now left with a small segment which you can see highlighted at the moment in purple. This creates a little object at the end that we can now use to fill and add that extra detailing onto the rocket itself. Oops, copied the wrong thing there. Just going to add the same little bit of flashing onto the other thruster. Just move that into place. With them being the same, I can use the same one. I'll just double check that they're aligned so that I've got them correct. So we can highlight the two of them and fill them white. We're going to use these in the same way we're going use the window for another little effect in a second. So, now I'm going to create the same type of flashing as a nose cone effect. Not an effect, just a little nose cone really. Same thing again, copy the body, create a rectangle, put it on top, and then put it on top, and then use the Pathfinder tool to subtract him and fill that nose cone again with white. That's us got our little bits of flashing. So to make it look more blueprinty, kind of sketchy, we're going to create an effect onto all of these different parts that we've made white. It's the scribble effect. So let's do that. Select the viewport, play around with the different values to get the type of effect you want. That's probably too much. We want to make it look more a little bit more strokey. A little bit no, it's good. In appearance, we're going to move the scribble effect into our fill, and that will allow us to keep the stroking around the edge of the shape. If we don't do that, then the stroking is kind of lost. So I find that in the appearance editor, just dragging it into the fill that you've chosen gets around that. And we'll do that with all of the other white flashing that we have. Same effect, appearance, and move the scribble into the fill again. Done. So that's us created our little rocket ship. I've added a little bit of detail in here that show a path of the rocket ship. Guess you can work out how to do that yourselves. Now I'm going to add a little bit of text which will help us see how we can make this look like someone's added or written on the blueprint some sort of notes. So we're going to add a little formula here that's in keeping with the theme. We're using the handwriting Dakota font, and that looks kind of sketchy. It's nice, it looks kind of handwritten, so that gives the right effect that we want. Now add the other side of the formula. Make sure that's white. And more. And this formula is acceleration equals change in velocity over time taken, so we're going to have to add a divider. So we'll put in a line here, fill that white and make sure that's got a reasonable size stroke so it can be seen. And then what we'll do is we'll change that stroke to not be so uniform, so it looks like there's been a pressure added when someone's written on the particular thing. Actually, that's the wrong way around. We'll flip that so that it looks like someone has pressed heavier as they put the pen down, and as they have finished their stroke, their pen has came off the page, so it's got lighter. So you can see the heavier side on the left hand side. Now we're going to make this look a little bit less uniform by rotating these a little bit so they're not quite in line with the grid behind it. Again, adding that little bit more of a sketchy feel, like it's just been noted on. That's it. That's us. So, final thing we want to do is add in some of the sort of the guidelines that you would expect to see on a blueprint. These lines generally would be how people mark out what they're going to draw. So we'd probably be done first, but I'm going to add them here at the end to create the effect. I'll just add a few. I'll add a centre plumb point. We'll do a horizontal point for the window. I'll make both of these dashed, so we'll make them white. Actually, I want to stroke them white, not fill them white. Cool. And we will make them dashed. Now we're going to add in a couple of sort of measurement lines, so we'll do a couple and keep them with the sort of the width of the nose cone. We'll hit shift whilst we're dragging that out so that it keeps it perfectly horizontal. We'll remove dash lines and add the two arrowheads. Make that one at the moment. I'll do one for the width of the rocket's body, showing that we've getting a thought about that a little bit. Holding shift again. Pull one out for the length of the rocket's body, and also one for the main thruster, the main central thruster, and we'll measure out the side on the side thrusters, or effectively both, as they're the same size. Probably going to make these a little bit shorter, just to keep it a little bit neater. And probably make these lines a little bit bigger. Yeah, that looks a bit better. A bit more pronounced. We can see the lines a bit clearer now. So come over to www.scott-sherwood.com and hopefully there'll be some other tutorials that you will be able to find useful. Thanks.